Revenge of the Robber Barons. September 9, 2019 by Anna von Reitz. We don't study history much, at least not history that matters, so very few people remember the antitrust and anti-monopoly actions that toppled Standard Oil, gave rise to the IMF, and unleashed the revenge of the robber barons on innocent people from here to Bangkok. J.D. Rockefeller and the railroad barons discovered something important: you can control both ends of anything connected by and dependent upon a transportation corridor, whether it's people traveling from Boston to New York City on a sleek passenger train, corn being transported from Kansas to Wyoming on a rickety old freight train, or oil being pumped from Beeville, Texas to Galveston, Texas. The access to whatever is on the other end of the line is what drives the market, and the middlemen who control the pipelines and electrical grids and trains and trucks and planes control the markets via control of the transportation. It's really simpler to think of this as pipelines, J.D. Rockefeller's specialty, because it is all about pipelines, of one kind or another: oil pipelines, drug pipelines, people pipelines, services pipelines, banking pipelines, commodity pipelines, even pipeline pipelines. Every system that transports something or someone from point A to point B is a pipeline, and that is clearly how old J.D. saw the world. Control the pipeline, and you control the producers of whatever is being delivered, as well as the consumers, waiting on the other end for the product. In this way, Standard Oil, which wasn't really an oil company, conquered the known world. It simply controlled transport of oil, both crude oil going from wells to refineries, and refined product going to docks and tanker ships and railroad yards. With the flick of a pen, Rockefeller could impose extra fees on producers, and tax consumers. His position was not unlike the coercive power of a government. And therein lies the rub, the clue, and the answer to what has happened to this country since 1922. You see, the business of providing government services is just another pipeline. That's how J.D. saw it. That's how Nelson saw it. That's how all the Rockefellers saw it, and still see it to this day. On one end of the government pipeline you have the service providers, all those government employees and programs. On the other end of the government pipeline, you have all those people who have become dependent on government services. And in the middle, controlling everything, taxing everyone, is your own deceptively named corporation, the U.S. Postal Service, not the U.S. Post Office, the Department of the Treasury, not the Treasury Department. So you have one group, public employees, that is motivated to spur on need for their services, and another group that screams bloody murder in the politicians' ears if those services aren't available, are slow, are inadequate in any way. And in the middle, you have the pipeline owners, happily dictating everything to everyone, including the price of all these services. While public employees and public employee unions are a fairly obvious target, and so are all the people clamoring for more and more and more free benefits and more services and more money spent on them, it's the pipeline owners I want you to focus on, because they are the real problem. You see, J.D. took it hard when the government dismantled Standard Oil, so he and his buddies decided to dismantle the government, and make a mockery of it. How? By turning it into a pipeline operation. As usual, they have no moral compass in any of this. They didn't think about the countries they were selling down the tubes, literally. They didn't bother themselves about lying to the innocent victims of their schemes. All they thought about was profit and control, profit and control, profit and control. For over 100 years they have profited themselves at the expense of billions of people, billions of truncated, miserable, unhealthy lives. And they haven't cared at all. Whether it was oil or aid to families with dependent children, the shtick has been the same: control the pipeline and thereby control both ends of the pipeline, the markets connected by that pipeline. So who actually owns the government pipelines? Who sits on the board of directors for the government of the United States, Inc.? Who owns the IMF? Hint, it was started by Standard Oil. Who owns the Federal Reserve? Who owns the Department of the Treasury? All it takes is a good private investigator with some industry contacts. Most of it is public record, one way or another. In a month of hard slogging you can track down every single government services pipeline, every board member, every CEO. Who is in charge of the Exchange Stabilization Fund? President Trump and Secretary Mnuchin. Who is chairman and president of the National Security Council? President Trump. Who is in charge of the Conference of Governors? What is a municipal league? Trilateral Commission? Council on Foreign Relations? Council of State Governments? Council of County Governments? And exactly what are all these unauthorized, unconstitutional, unelected, unofficial agencies? Who knows? Raise your hands? These are the pipeline operators. They are usurping upon and controlling all aspects of government services. They are standing in the background telling Janet Reno to firebomb the Branch Davidians. Shoot Randy Weaver's wife and little baby. Murder Lavoy Finicum. And they are getting away with it under color of law, because they own and operate the Pinkertons, the private security forces represented by all the law enforcement officers. This entire system of oppression grew out of the railroad transfer corridors, pipelines for people and commodities, and the bank transfer systems, pipelines for financial transactions, and the program services organizations, pipelines for public services, and it all bears the earmarks of J.D. Rockefeller and his sons and their Bell Epic cronies, the Vanderbilts and Warburgs, the Carnegies and Astors, the Winchesters and the Edisons, and all the rest of the party hearties, who, one way or another, were involved in pipelines of various sorts. And still are, to the detriment of the whole earth and everyone on it. They have contrived to run the government as private pipeline enterprises and have privatized government functions to the point where there is no government anymore. Now they hurry themselves home, looking for the dream they slaughtered, only to find that the friends and neighbors they betrayed are waking up. 50 extra years of the Marshall Plan? 75 extra years of the Victory Tax? Bankrupting the trademarked Federal Reserve System? Stealing the receipts from the bottomry bonds placed on our vessels without our knowledge, all the insurance paid for by us? Our identities stolen by people appearing to be government workers and hospital employees? Our DNA stolen as discarded DNA by snooper poopers at hospitals and fake police following us into public toilets in hopes of cigarette butt or a used napkin? Our homes being mortgaged to pay for the debts of foreign service organizations? It's all in the pipelines, folks.